Hello guys, welcome to another episode of Jacob Dev. In this video, we're going to talk about an open source version of Perplexity. It's called Perplexica. Before we go into details about Perplexica, so let's give a little bit roundup of Perplexity. So Perplexity is a AI-powered search engine that's gotten very popular today, and it's worth a lot of cash. You can Google it to find the valuation, but thanks to the community, we have an open source version of it, which you can build by yourself. And in this video, we're going to talk about how to build it on Kaggle. And that being said, let's get started. So first, let's go to GitHub of Perplexica. And basically, it's an AI-powered search engine similar to Perplexity. And there's a lot of documentation here. It basically tells you how to install it, how to build it. It's very complicated. And it's also used the another project. It's called the SearXNG. By itself, it's a very large project. A lot of people that contribute to it. You can see that. But today, we're gonna make this very simple for you guys. So we're gonna build this step by step on Kaggle. So that being said, let's go to kaggle.com, and we created a Perplexity notebook. So before we go in further, so here is what it looks like. So you can see this is exactly like Perplexity, but a slightly different design, but it's very similar. So, and here's the search engine that's powered the Perplexica. So two together, it's gonna be very cool project. So let's first go to the Perplexity. Let's run a query. It's called some of the most popular YouTubers in technology, right? So you can see there's Unbox Therapy, and there's Marcus Brownie, so on and so forth. Let's go to an open version of it. Let's go to the Perplexica and see what are the results. You can see this is very similar, right? You can see Marcus Brownie and Unbox Therapy. Also, you can search image. You can search video, right? It's very cool. And also you can pick the models. You can go here and pick the models. You can pick Grok models. You can pick Ollama models. In this demo, we're gonna set up Ollama, but we're gonna demo this in Grok, which you just saw, right? Let's go back to Kaggle Notebook. And you can see basically the first step to set up this project is called set up. You have to set up the SearXNG. It's also called SearXNG, XNG, and then let's first set up the search part of it. So first, because of Kaggle doesn't support Node in a supervised environment, so we just have to do a soft link to make sure that Node is in the user bin. After that, make sure that this is available because the default node is in Conda from Kaggle. And then we set up all the dependencies. You can basically get all the dependencies from the SearXNG documentation. Let's go to the SearXNG, SearXNG, and basically they have documentation here. Let's go to the step by step. So you can see here, it's gotten very complicated, but this is a little bit complicated, so it's not really exactly going to work on Kaggle. You can set up following these steps on your local desktop or laptop, or maybe a VirtualBox machine, but this is not exactly going to work on Kaggle. So in Kaggle, we're going to set up this a little bit slightly different, and it's going to be easier than you think. So let's go back to Kaggle. So first, we got all the dependencies from the official documentation, which is here. And we basically have to create a directory. It's called SearXNG. And after that, I make sure that folder exists. We just clone the official repo, which is the SearXNG, to the SearXNG folder. And we set a subfolder. It's called SearXNG -src -source folder. So that's all the SearXNG stuff. Right, and after that, we basically create an environment under the same root SearXNG folder. So basically, in the SearXNG folder, there's the Python environment. There's another one is basically the source code. right? So, and we just make sure all this path exists, the Python path exists, because we're going to use that to build the dependencies. So make sure the Python and Python path, all this stuff exists in the virtual environment. And also install using the pip in the virtual environment. We're going to install upgrade pip and set up tools, wheels, and PyYAML. So this is basically whatever they also put in here. Maybe it's in here. Yes, that's where it is. So let's go back to Kaggle. And then we basically install all the dependencies. You can see here, basically we do a pip install using the pip in the virtual environment to install using the official documentation, which they specified in here. I believe that's in here, yes. So this will install all these Py project dependencies for the SearXNG. And after that, we just do also some of the changes that's not documented in the official documentation. So basically first we need to make a directory in the configuration, etc SearXNG. And what we do, we just create a settings file. So the documentation is slightly different. They did a different way of doing it. It's not exactly gonna work on Kaggle. So in Kaggle, make sure we just create a file in the settings.yaml file in the SearXNG folder. After that, we basically just do make sure the debug is true, and we just add the JSON as a format because the API is going to use JSON instead of HTML, right? So you can see the SearXNG, this is HTML, but we when we call this endpoint, then we're going to use JSON. So make sure that's in place, and make sure the port is different than the default port. We use 8889, not the default one, because the default one is actually has a Jupyter notebook in it. So that's a little bit different in Kaggle. So you have to use the different port than the 888. So, and the secret key, change that to a different secret key, whatever you want, but don't use the default one. Okay, and also the Redis set to false. So we don't use Redis, but the instruction from the documentation says you have to use Redis, but you don't have to do that. That's also a different setup. And other than that, the configuration for SearXNG is good to go. Okay. And after you set up the configuration, you don't do anything yet or stop the service. Instead, install supervisor first. Okay. Make sure the supervisor is installed. It's basically backend process, make all this stuff run in the backend. So, and you basically create a SearXNG configuration file. And after you've done that, just make sure that the command line is using this command line, which is the Python in the virtual environment you just set up, and the application is the application in the SearXNG source code. So it's a web app.py. The path, just use this path. That's exactly where the web app is, right? And also make sure the logs, you set up the logs so you can see what's going wrong. And also after you set up the configuration for supervisor for the SearXNG, use the ungrok to actually expose the traffic or turn on the traffic to the public URL, which you saw, right? So all these URLs are ungrok URLs, so you can actually use those URLs in the browser. So it's not localhost. So, and after that, make sure that you have a function to run bash command within Python. Then get ungrok console from get ungrok token from ungrok console and paste it here. After doing that, make sure you basically spin up a ungrok URL but pointing to localhost 80. So I'll explain why. So make sure that you point it to the localhost 80 at this time, but we will explain why it's point to 80. Okay, so then this is actually point to the localhost 80. After that, we just create another public URL so you can see the SearXNG in real time, right? So basically this is SearXNG URL. So you can see it's E616. So you can see E616. This is the SearXNG. You can actually search for it. So for example, you can search for what's the economy, right? You can see it's actually doing the autocomplete, right? Look like in 2025. And then they will do an autocomplete. You can just search for it, right? So it's basically like Google. See, it's basically like Google. It's very powerful search engine. So that being said, let's go back to Kaggle book. So then after you set all this ungrok configuration, and you have to basically set up the Perplexica now. Because the search is ready, then you have to set up Perplexica. Then you basically do a clone. Alright, you first go to the Kaggle working directory, which this is your project root, and then you do a git clone. Make sure the Perplexica project is cloned to your Kaggle working folder, just like this one. Okay, so basically you can see the Perplexica folder is in the Kaggle working, and after you set that up, make sure you update the UI environment of Perplexica. So in Perplexica, there are two parts, right? It was built in Next.js. So there's a front end, there's a back end on the Node.js. So this is to set up the front end of Perplexica. So then you have to use the public URL that's in this one, which you just saw, right? cd0c. Make sure that you just use this same URL here. All right, use the same URL for the API endpoint. So this is for WebSocket for front-end streaming. The other one is just for the API. Okay, so this is basically you have to set up both using the URL just you created in here, right? Okay, let's continue and go to the Perplexica UI folder. Build up all these dependencies for the front end, right? For the UI, and then go to the Perplexica folder, which is a root folder. Install all the dependencies for the backend. Okay, and after that, make sure you set up the configuration of Perplexica to use the grok token. Right, you can get a grok token from grok console, and you also kind of set up the SearXNG as a backend, which we just saw is 8889, but we set up instead of 8888, but we set up 8889. So this is different than documentation. So documentation is a little bit incorrect. So also install Olama, right? So Olama, which you will spin up inside the notebook, which we just specify here is 11434. It's a default URL of Olama. Okay, and after that, you basically do an npm run build. You basically build the UI first, and then build the backend. Okay, and after that, just make sure that you set up the supervisor for all these services. First, we set up the Perplexity backend service, and then you basically spin up the service using npm, using this folder, which is the root folder, and do a run start. And somehow this is not working on Kaggle. I'll basically use this as a separate command line, so you can see that later. But this one, probably you can skip that, but it's optional. And then the other one is set up the UI service, which is Perplexica UI service. So we're using the same command, but we change the folder to the UI folder. So it will spin up the UI. This is the one you see in here. Basically, that's the UI. And then you basically just, because all this supervisor configuration is up and running, it's good to go. So just do a supervisor start. It will start up the Perplexica UI, Perplexica service, and also will spin up the SearXNG. So, but the Perplexica backend still have some issues in Kaggle using supervisor, so we'll set up a little bit different. We just use a separate command line for that. So we can check the status. You can see the SearXNG service. Basically, this backend search is running, the UI is running, but the service is a little bit issue. So we will not use that for now, right? So that will be set up differently. So and then you can actually check the logs, like the backend search log, the Perplexica services backend service log. You can see there's issue here, and there's another log for the Perplexica UI service. Right, you can see there's no errors here, and so then we have to set up Nginx. So this is the reason why we actually spin up the 80 port instead of the 3000 port as a default Next.js port. So you can see, as I mentioned earlier, right? So this is basically the reason why we set up the port as 80, because this is actually going to Nginx, and then Nginx will do a reverse proxy to route different traffic to different services. So that's the reason we set up the address to 80 instead of the other different service port. So Nginx will do everything in this case. So this URL, public URL, is going to point to the Nginx that you set up in Notebook. So let's continue. So then after you set up Nginx, make sure you configure Nginx for Perplexica. And the port is 80. You can server name, you can use this ngrok-free.app, or you can just specify everything. But we just use the ngrok-free app. This is where the ngrok domain, right? Any ngrok public URL will map to this configuration. Then we set up the next static routing, which you can set up the alias pointing to the static CSS.js folder. And after that, we just set up the default URL to point to the localhost 3000. This is basically the front end. So when the traffic comes in, this will go to the proxy path to the front end of Perplexica, and then you will set up the API endpoint, which is the backend URL routing. So the API will point into 3001 API, and for the WebSocket, you can see the WebSocket is going to point into the 3001. So basically, this is all the routing you have set up for Nginx, and the public URL basically will route to different services as the app running. So after that, make sure you do a stop and start of Nginx. It will spin up Nginx, and you can run some analytics tool like the net tools, right? You can do that. You can see all the ports in here. Right? You can do a netstat. You can see all the ports in here, and after that, we install Ollama. So which I think if you follow this channel, you're already familiar with that. So basically, we just run Ollama install and do a Ollama as a backend service. And we pull Ollama model SQ1 2.5 14b, and we pull another embedding model, which is Nomic embed text. And Ollama is set up. You can see the Ollama is downloaded, all the models that's needed. And then after that, because the supervisor doesn't work for the Perplexica backend service for some reason, and then what we did is basically we set this up on a different command line. So we just directly run the command line in a cell. So that's it. So you can see the service is running up, right? So basically, this is a Perplexica backend service. It's running up. Then you can see all the logs in here, right? And that's where you see right here. And let's run the same query, right, as we run in the Perplexity, and come here and then just copy paste and hit enter. And you can see this is what we want, right? That's exactly similar to what Perplexity does. And let's go back to the Perplexica front end. You can see you can configure the model here, right? All the grok models. You can configure the Ollama models as well. Okay, and you can paste the grok key. This is reading from the configuration. You set it in the notebook, and you can also use other providers like Anthropic, which is the cloud Sonnet provider, right? And also you can use OpenAPI, anyone you want to use. It supports a lot of models, open source, closed-end models, which is really cool. And so this is a super cool project so far, right? You can see all these different setup and what it uses. So, and also you can search images, and you can search videos, right? This is exactly what Perplexity does. So it's a very cool project. And that being said, hopefully you enjoy this video. If you feel this helpful, please subscribe, like, or comment if you have any questions. See you in the next one.